I'd like to call the meeting of the Bedford Township Board, September 17, 2019, to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I could have Deacon George Kuzno from Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Good evening. This is my first meeting. Father Don asked me if I would invoke the prayer. We stand before you, Holy Spirit, conscious of our sinfulness, but aware that we together in your name we gather. Come to us, remain with us, and enlighten our hearts. Give us light and strength to know your will, to make it our own, and to live it in our lives. Guide us by your wisdom, support us by your power. For you are God, sharing the glory of the Father and Son. You desire justice for all. Enable us to uphold the rights of others. Do not allow us to be misled by ignorance or corrupted by fear of failure. Unite us to yourself in the bond of love, and keep us faithful to all that is true. As we gather in your name, may we temper justice with love, so that all our discussions and reflections may be pleasing to you and earn the reward promised to good and faithful servants. We ask this of you, who live and reign with the Father and the Son, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Due to Mr. Peroni's absence, I will need a motion to appoint a moderator for this meeting only. Ms. Francis?
I'd like to make
You are now.
I'd like to make a motion that we appoint the Township Clerk, Trudy Hirschberg, to chair the meeting tonight in Mr. Peroni's absence.
I'll support.
I have a motion and support. Any discussion? Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye.
And Peroni is absent.
And the motion carries. Public hearing. I need a motion to open the public hearing for the resolution to establish Waterford Subdivision Plat 3 Streetlight Special Assessment District. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Nancy, seconded by Mr. Steiner. Any discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye. And the motion carried. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on the issue of streetlights? Seeing none, can I have a motion to close the public hearing? So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Tinneberry, seconded by Mr. Steiner. Any discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried. The notice of streetlight hearing was published, and this is to install one streetlight in Waterford Plat 3. The contractor has already paid the $100 for that light, and I'm looking for a motion to approve the resolution.
I make a motion to approve the resolution to establish the Waterford Subdivision Plat 3 Streetlight Special Assessment District.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Steiner, supported by Mr. Clemens. Any discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried. The second motion we need on this is to authorize the change for standard lighting contract with Consumers Energy. This is to add the street light into our contract. I need a motion.
I make a motion to amend the Consumers Energy Lighting contract to include this new streetlight within Waterford subdivision.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Steiner, seconded by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemmons?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carries. Next is approval of the agenda. Looking for a motion.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Clemmons, support by Mr. Montry. Discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Clemmons?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried. Consent agenda. The Agenda Committee recommends to approve and place on file the minutes of September 3rd, 2019 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board, to file the general savings, pooled funds, and CD reports from the treasurer, and the revenue expense report and balance sheet for the period ending August 31st, 2019.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
I'll support.
Motion by Mr. Steiner, seconded by Mr. Clemmons. Discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemmons?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
And Mrs. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carries. Next is presentation, swearing-in ceremony for Bedford Township firefighters. Chief? If you would all raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States of America, the state of Michigan, and Bedford Township? Do you affirm that you will follow the rules and regulations of the Bedford Fire Department and obey the commands of the officer in charge of emergency calls and drills? That you will honestly and impartially perform all the duties of the firefighter and respect and protect and honor the dignities of Bedford Township Fire Department to the best of your abilities, so help you God? Congratulations.
Going against the stream, huh?
Glad you're here. Thank you. Congrats. Congrats.
Good evening, everyone. We have a rather large group that we're swearing in tonight, and I just want to thank everybody, all the friends and family and the board members for coming out tonight. We've asked each of them to select someone who will come up and pin their badge on tonight. So, first is firefighter Jeffrey Brushaber II. Jeffrey's assigned to Station 1. He's a certified firefighter. He's completing his EMT training this month. Go ahead, Roger. He joins his grandfather, Roger, and father, Lieutenant Jeff Brushaber, as an active department member. His grandfather, Roger, will be pinning his badge on tonight. Next is firefighter EMT Bryn Duval. Bryn is also assigned to Station 1, and she's followed in the footsteps of her grandfather, father, and brother in serving as a Bedford Township firefighter. Her father, Captain Scott Duval, is pinning her badge on tonight. Next is firefighter Matthew Fournier. Matt's a certified firefighter, and he's also completing his EMT training this month. He's assigned to Station 2, and in keeping with tonight's family theme, Matt serves with his uncle, firefighter Joe Kopsiak, at Station 2. His mother, Christy's pinning his badge this evening. Firefighter EMT Lucas Frucci. Lucas is assigned to Station 2. He also serves as a firefighter EMT in Blissfield under the direction of his father, Fire Chief Dale Frucci. We'd like to thank Chief Frucci for sharing Lucas with us. Luke's girlfriend, Lainey, was pinning his badge tonight, so thank you. Next is firefighter EMR Reyes Garcia. He's assigned to Station 3, and in addition to working here, he also serves as an Air Force firefighter. Public safety runs in Reyes' family in his blood. His father's a retired police officer, and his father Robert's pinning his badge tonight. Brandon Lidster is next. He's a firefighter and EMT assigned to Station 2 as well. He also serves in the Blissfield Fire Department as well as here in Bedford. And as the theme continues tonight, he and his brother Brian is a captain in Deerfield's Fire Department. And his wife Sarah quickly pinned his badge tonight. I'll read faster. Firefighter EMT Mark Pekalski is assigned to Station 1 in Temperance. He's one of the few exceptions tonight as he's a first-generation firefighter. However, I expect to be swearing in the next generation of Pekalski, starting with Kylie in about 7 years. Is that right, Kylie? And Abby and Aubrey in about 2029. I'll be seeing you ladies up here for your swearing in. So Mark's wife Sarah pinned his badge tonight. Lastly, Sean Strickler. Sean's assigned to Station 3. His father, Ron, also served at Station 3, and his great-grandfather, Richard Strickler, was a longtime member of the Dundee Fire Department. His grandfather, I find it interesting, was a neighbor of mine, and one of my first memories of the fire department when I was a kid is his grandfather and my uncles and my father leaving cookouts in the neighborhood when the fire siren would go off, so it's really, really fun to have him here. He's also a member of the Erie Department, and his father, Ron, who was a member of Station 3, pinned him tonight. Again, we appreciate your time, appreciate the group, and I'm just really excited about not only the new members we have, but the interesting dynamic we have of legacy coming into the department. So, thank you.
At this time, anyone who would like to step out may do so.
Most popular thing on the agenda.
It was.
Can we go too?
Leaving's popular.
And to think I thought the people were happy about it.
And then everybody in the back, if you could move forward. Just joking.
Must have been something we said.
I think she throws spitballs, that's why.
For the record, I appreciate you doing that. They can all go celebrate now.
Right. Okay, we're going to continue on. Public comment. Comments are limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items only.
Logan Tisdale, 1308 Brandywine Street. This is about the presentations. I've had 2 badges pinned on me. One was when I was a AAA school crossing guard in Brooklyn, New York. And then when, in 1968, when I got to be a state trooper. It's a thrill to see young men and women come up here and willing to serve. That's what it's about. And our prayers should be with them to keep them safe, because firefighting is a dangerous job. And so I just want to congratulate them, and I got to get to sit next to a retired police officer, so that was kind of cool. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on. Staff reports, we have nothing. Unfinished business. Appointments to the capital improvement plan. Nancy?
Where to begin? I submitted this for the purpose of continuing to move forward. We had talked about capital improvement plan, and then we moved to appoint a committee. And so in my get her done kind of philosophy, I didn't want things to drop. So I submitted the memo that you see before you. I understand that after I submitted the memo, the supervisor felt he needed to submit a memo, which is fine. The concern that I have was that, and if this isn't accurate, I apologize, but there was some misunderstanding, that the supervisor is supposed to appoint all committee people. And I brought my little red book tonight just to clarify that. It specifically says that the supervisor is responsible to appoint planning commissioners with the approval of the board, but there is no designation anywhere in the statute that's, and if you can verify it with the sitting attorney tonight if you care to, but there's nothing in the statute that governs general law township government that states that the supervisor is responsible to appoint anyone to the board. I'm totally fine with his suggestions, but it's this board. This board needs to do our job and to look at the names submitted and determine who this board wants to appoint. And in the future, I would hope that we would follow through with anyone who has a suggestion of anyone who to be on any committee, even the planning commission, that they would submit their recommendation or their names to this board, and then this board would make the determination on any future appointments. So I'll answer any questions that you might have about any of the things that I submitted. I will say that the addendum from the MTA determining capital improvement projects was very good information. I had seen this article before, but it was wonderful that it was added to the information with regard to what a capital improvement plan is for and how it's set up. I personally didn't think the Cascade Charter Township really has a lot to do with Bedford Township. I'm very familiar with Cascade Charter Township. My daughter-in-law is from there. Her family still lives there. We go there frequently. But a charter township is totally different than a general law township, and I think we run into some danger when we compare ourselves to charter townships. A charter township has the ability in their charter to determine other funding, other mechanisms to be able to put through different plans that a general law township does not have. And especially in the funding, and I noticed that one of their projects was funded through a millage. We do not have the opportunity to add on a millage like a charter township does without a vote of the people, which I'm very thankful for. I'm glad that we're a charter town, or a general law township, but I think we run into a danger when we compare ourselves to charter townships.
Ms. Hirschberger?
Yeah.
Steiner. Well, I take back my compliments, Nancy. I thought you gave us the Cascade Charter Township. That was in the packet.
No, I didn't do that.
Okay. Because I'll tell you, I did compliment Ms. Tinberg. I said the process which Cascade Charter Township, it's got a good layout to it. Agree, it's very different, Charter Township versus general law like Bedford is, but it's got a good layout. Of course, funding is different. It's a different type of mechanism, et cetera. But it does lay out a lot of simple, easy to read facts of how you want to put your plan together. I did point out, of course, that no matter whom we appoint to this particular board, they will need to also work very closely, especially when it comes to all the funding, with the Drain Commission, because we've got the sewer treatment plant, we've got our sewers overall, we got our water distribution, we've got all of our buildings, we've got our fire equipment. Well, the fire equipment, the fire chief already has a good handle on that, but that still is part of this plan, so his plan needs to be inserted. So any of these kind of things we've got out there, a pavement asset management plan that Mr. Francis and Mr. Peroni, and who else was, were you up there too, Trudy? Somebody else was on that group. There was 3, wasn't it, Paul? Anyway,
I think so.
but still, that's the same type of thing. The plan is already started out there. We need to follow that. We don't just throw that away because, oh, we've got a capital improvement plan, let's wipe everything else out. So just to take that into consideration and make sure we grab all of those things that are already done out there instead of duplicating the work. That's all.
I'll go. If I can speak freely, just how I see this when like going through this, that I agree with Ms. Tinberry that it's this board who puts this together. I actually appreciate having more than an initial 6 for us to just go, yep, rubber stamp, and we like those guys. I like that there's like options. But like, when I'm going through it, how I see it, I think like, both, if that's how I see this situation is we have Dennis Jenkins on both, Trudy on both. I think Mr. Bushman's reputation precedes him. I think that's self-explanatory. Mr. Keene and Mr. Fritz, I do not know, so that I felt like would be on those with more experience on the board but from what I've heard, they both seem in line with the board that we're trying to put together, and which would, that would conflict with Mr. Anger and Mr. Shaw, if I'm not mistaken, would be those two. And I forget if Mr. Shaw already being on a few other boards, like being on this board for myself, I feel like this board is something that is going to take some commitment to be a part of. I think it's going to take some time and some dedication. That's why I love having Mr. Jenkins on it. I don't know Mr. Jenkins, but here, for an understanding of a thing like this, anyone who has the kind of passion that I'm hearing that he has for like this topic, that's who you want on a committee like this. You need someone like that driving this kind of thing. So, and then I know that Mr. Peroni had said that he had talked to Mr. Anger and got a feel for what he was like thinking on being on this board, and just had admitted, which, because I said that I kind of had said the same thing of, I don't want to, I would be very interested in being a part of this, but I almost feel I'd be overextending myself to say, unless, like, I would do it if it need be, but that it sounded like Mr. Anger kind of gave the same answer of, like, yeah, if you need me, but I don't know how much you're going to be able to get of me, where it seemed like Mr. Keene and Mr. Fritz had a little bit more leniency in schedule and the like expertise in the fields, which, so what brought me down to how like I said, how I saw this was, we're making a decision for that 6th spot between Ms. Tinferry and Mr. Francis, which I think both have there's a lot of positives for both regards of who you have in that final role. And that's how I saw this discussion for this board, is what makes the most sense for that spot between our other 2 board members. So that's just my thoughts, but that's how I saw this whole situation.
Just to comment on the people that I brought forward. Being a liaison to the Planning Commission, I talked to the Planning Commission about this at our last meeting on Wednesday, and Matt Anger is the chairman of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission ultimately is responsible for carrying out the capital improvement plan. So I know there was discussion about having, and even I mentioned that there should be people who are totally capable and in that vein of knowing what to put on a capital improvement plan. But the mechanism that's going to carry out the capital improvement plan is the planning commission. It's not any one of these people and their background or expertise. This is just to put a plan on paper after and Matt Anger and Dan Steffen both indicated that they would be interested because they're interested in getting this to move forward. Dennis has talked about it on planning before. And so I talked to Matt. I don't know who said this or who made them aware, but I talked to planning commissioners, Matt and Dan, and they were given the impression that this was going to be a daytime meeting and that wouldn't work for them because they both work. Well, we haven't established the committee, so we haven't established, I think the people on the committee should be there to establish the days and times that they can meet. So he was given misinformation that, however, as he called me, or I called him, we talked about it, and at this point, he is not willing to carry on his name any longer. He wants the planning commission to take part when this is all established. But again, this is just the ad hoc committee. It's not a board, it's a committee that is being put together for the purpose of putting a plan on paper, and then it'll be carried out by the planning commission. So Matt has changed his mind and is not interested at this point, but I think it was unfortunate that he was given the impression that the times during the day had been established, because I just don't think we should be doing that to a committee before they get appointed. And then the other comment I wanted to make, I have no problem with any of the background or the expertise of anyone on that Mr. Peroni has put forward. However, we have not yet heard from Rudolph Libby, and I don't have a problem with Mike Keene, but if Rudolph Libby is going to have any contact in this, then Mike Keene on the CIP to me would be a conflict of interest. And at the same time, Barry Bushman. If we're going to contract with Manick and Smith for any of these projects, I think that someone who works for that organization being on the committee would be a conflict of interest. That's just my opinion, and it's up to this board to make the determination. So other than that, if the board decides that they don't see a conflict in either one of those places, then it's fine with me.
Mr. Cronin?
So I had a couple of thoughts. The one thing, the common is that I think everybody, this whole board, and obviously the two slates, recognize Dennis Jenkins as being critical to the success of this project. So I think that's a really good starting point. I think the other thing, Nancy, to talk to your point about conflict of interest, I was reminded today the CEO of Disney stepped down from Apple's board. He's been a longstanding board member for 8 years. He did so because next month, both Apple and Disney will be competing in the marketplace, and you have a conflict of interest. But for 8 years, there hasn't been a conflict. And so I think there's a path here by which both, Mr. Keene or Mr. Bushman could be involved in the CIP process. And obviously, if a contract gets generated and there becomes a conflict, that would need to be addressed at that time in the process. But I think we're really early on that. My only caution area is twofold. I agree with you wholeheartedly that this board can appoint. As long as I've followed Bedford Township and as long as I've been on this board, the process has been, we announce the position, applications are taken, the supervisor recommends, and then as a board we accept or we decline. We haven't done this in this process, and so I'm a little hesitant because we didn't follow our own process. I'm also a little hesitant because the supervisor's not here. And so he doesn't have, an opportunity to do his voice. My suggestion was going to be this. I think we all agree that Dennis is integral. Nancy, there's no question that you've picked this up and run with it. I don't know that we couldn't make 2 appointments, and from there, the beginning of that committee should be weighing in, because the fact of the matter is what if, and since Barry's here, and I know Barry, I don't think he'll mind, what if Barry's skill set is redundant to Dennis? He doesn't serve any benefit to the committee. And the whole point of a committee of 5 or 7 is to look for a diverse skill set to be sure that all of your directives are covered. I don't think right now we even know what those skill sets are. And so it feels a hair premature to assign people until you have a couple of core people agree, this is the tentative path, this is the direction we want to take, and then fill those slots with twofold, the people that are going to help you achieve the stated goals, but more importantly, the people that go through the process and apply for the position and show that interest. I get concerned when we pick up the phone and I call and I say, hey, Craig, you want to be on a committee? And Craig's, in the middle of ordering his lunch and he says, yeah, sure, just let me know. And then all of a sudden, next thing you see, we have a name on a piece of paper. To me, when you call somebody and say, hey, Craig, do you want to be on a committee? And Craig thinks about it and he's like, okay, I'll go in, I fill out the application. That demonstrates a level of interest, a level of commitment that I think is one more threshold where you can begin to expect that person to participate in the committee. So that would be my only cautionary, is that I don't know that tonight, as we walk out of this meeting, we have to have a rock solid 5 through 7. I definitely think we want to get started. I definitely think that Dennis is a starting point, and I absolutely have no problem, Nancy, with you also taking the reins on this. But I'm curious what the discussion would be when you start fleshing out the first 3 or 4 steps of what this committee is going to do as to who would be the best advocates on that committee.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Again, I don't have any problem with what Mr. Clemens has suggested. However, the motion, actually, that I think Mr. Clemens made,
It was my motion.
would be that the committee would meet and begin within 30 days upon approval of this board. So the longer we wait, the 30 days gets longer. So, and the reason that this committee did not follow the same procedure is this is an ad hoc committee. It's not a standing committee.
No, understood.
And so to get everybody around to fill out forms, and some of these, like Barry and Mr. Shaw, and Fritz, the other option could be that we just turn it over to the planning commission, since it's their job to carry it out, and have them at their monthly meetings begin to put together the plan.
Well, and I think the motion, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, is that we start the committee. My question is the approval of 2 of the initial number, that would seem logically that we're starting the committee. There was nothing in the motion that gave a specific number or limited or.
Correct.
Correct. So we would be in keeping with the original motion. It's not like we're going to blow that motion at all. I think when all is said and done, I think there's a really big task. I am also a big proponent of doing this. I think it's really important for the future of this community, and I just want to see that we do it right. And I think if we're herky-jerky right out of the gate, then that's going to affect kind of where we end up.
Mr. Montroy?
Just a couple of quick thoughts. One, I would prefer the ad hoc committee as opposed to the planning, having the planning do that, just because of how spread out the meetings are, and just like, it seems like it's something that would really get drawn out, and it's difficult to really stay on that. And I would say, I like that idea. What would you think about if you did if we did the 2 township and the 2 planning, at least, and then you're kind of like, can pick you can be a little bit more specific on what you're because like to your point, like you're trying, all right, we're looking for who do we really want, but we know you have to have 2 planning and 2, you know what I mean, you're pretty limited in who your choices are going to be for those 4 positions. You got, you know what I mean, you got 8 and I don't know how many people are on planning. And then those 4, would those, now, I don't know, would those 4 make would make maybe recommendations to this board for approval to add on to that committee from that point, if we took that route?
Traditionally, we've always filled by virtue of the supervisor saying, these are the people I'd like on a committee. I realize this is a little bit different circumstance, but I also don't know that we necessarily need to deviate from that. Ultimately, we get a say. And I don't have a problem tonight whether we do 2 or 4. My only cautionary is that if we hold up where everybody is agreeing that Mr. Jenkins is integral to the project, I'd love to hear what Mr. Jenkins has to say about the rest of the board that we're going to assign to do such a big project. And it doesn't mean that he's the final decision maker. It means that he's as counsel to this board, saying, I think these people would be most effective. We still, as a board, get to say yes or no. The supervisor still gets to push through to us yes or no. But I don't like giving people tasks and assignments and then not giving them at least some latitude as to how they want to achieve that. And what I would hate to do is, in an effort to think we're helping things and setting a committee and moving it along, to inadvertently be hindering it because we didn't move along with the right group. And I trust whoever we recommend from this board and Mr. Jenkins to flesh that out accordingly. I think we're going to be okay, so.
I agree. I would like to hear from Mr. Jenkins who he thinks
Mhm.
would be the best people to move forward with this.
Madam Chairman,
Mhm.
I don't know that there's anything that prohibits this board from making a seventh position on that committee. Normally, committees have an unequal number of people so that you can have a majority vote. You know, if there are 2 board members or 3 board members that want to serve on it, nothing prohibits that I can see. But I agree with you that Dennis ought to be the one that really takes the lead on it at this point, because he's had, 30-plus years' experience in it, and we need that kind of experience. I also appreciate the experience that Barry Bushman has and Mike Keene have. We need their type of experience. I think both of those individuals have been involved in designing plans like this. I also agree that it's the Planning Commission's responsibility to actually implement it. It's their responsibility actually to draw the plan, but we're kind of helping them do that,
Correct.
so.
Mr. Steiner?
Mr. Francis, you went right where I was going next. I mean, Ms. Tinbury mentioned first the 3 different groups, public, township, and planning. It was 2, 2, and 2. The recent memo shows putting 5 names forward, and then Mr. Peroni puts 6 forward. Again, I don't like the 6 because you need an odd number. It just makes sense. I too agree that Mr. Jenkins, I mean, I started off with Mr. Jenkins years ago, and my first, I started EDC, but then I went to zoning appeals, then I went to planning commission. So working with Dennis, I mean, Dennis has been a big proponent of capital improvement plan for years. It's just getting the funding behind it and getting the will behind it to make it happen. And I think this is probably the most talk that's happened at the board level, and we don't need to wait and just keep putting this off. I too think that Mr. Jenkins should have some valuable input to make our selections here. I think I'm following Mr. Clements. I think maybe if we went with the 2 township board members or one board member and Mr. Jenkins, and have that discussion start at that level, and then bring those names back. I mean, I know almost everybody on this board and their capabilities. There's a couple that I don't know their full capabilities. Those are the ones, as Mr. Clements stated, it would be nice if we just had something on paper to show this is my expertise, this is what I've done for X amount of years. Maybe some of their educational background, et cetera, or what they really specialize in. Again, like you said, does it make sense to have Mr. Bushman, with all his years of experience, sitting next to somebody that has the same exact or almost the same exact criteria of experience? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, sometimes, the old two heads is better than one. That may be good too. But I don't have a problem with going to the 7th member as well. But again, I think we need to move forward at least for the first couple appointments.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Well, my whole passion is just moving forward, and it really doesn't matter that much. I think we're, from my perspective, we're putting too much emphasis on someone's background and experience, because it's really, I know Mr. Francis said that the last meeting, excuse me, Paul, but that this is hard. I don't think it's that hard, and I think that it's a matter of following a plan that we've seen many on online that we could follow. So I know I'm taking a step out here, and I'm hoping that I'll get a second, but in light of being expedient, I would like to make a motion that we approve the recommendations put forth by Paul Peroni, following up with what Mr. Clements had said about we take the people that the supervisor recommends. That's fine with me. I'm happy to get this moving. So I'd like to move that we take the members that have been put forth by Paul Peroni, and then after following up with Dennis Jenkins, he can make a recommendation for the 7th member. Thank you.
Motion by Ms. Tinneberry, seconded by Mr. Clements. Discussion, Mr. Montroy?
Oh. No. So we're doing, just for clarification, so that, including the 2 members? Including the members of the
including all
public?
members.
All members, okay.
All the members
Okay.
that were put forth by Mr. Peroni. Maybe I should read those. Mike Keane, Barry Bushman, Trudy Hirschberger, Paul Francis, Ron Fritz, and Dennis Jenkins.
No, that's-
Thank you for the 7th person, that makes sense.
I know,
I mean, from the original, we had
I'll let
6,
him-
but he had 6 on here, but saying we're gonna put a 7th on.
Dennis, well, yeah,
Right.
it's fine. We didn't want a 7th because we didn't want arguing, but now 7th is gonna be fine. Just
I don't
kidding,
argue with
kidding.
you.
Not you, the new ad hoc, I'm just kidding.
Call the question,
With-
please.
Do we have a second on that
It
motion?
Yes,
being
we
like a
Yes.
blank
I'll call the
to be
question.
filled,
filled.
yeah.
Madam Chair, the question's been called. Mr. Steiner?
Any more discussion? Can you please call the roll?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clements?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger?
No. And the motion carried 5-1. Next is the resolution to establish bulletin board display area policy procedures. We were asked to come up with a policy procedure, so we came up with this one. It was blessed by our attorneys. So I'm looking for a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the resolution to establish the bulletin board display area policy and procedure as presented.
I'll support.
Motion by Mr. Steiner, seconded by Mr. Clemens. Discussion?
Just one minor thing, and item 3, I just would be more comfortable if it said in the middle of that sentence, township job postings, so that we're not posting, is that what, was that the intent?
It was.
Yeah, so that we're not posting other things on bulletin boards. I go to Schoolhouse Commons and I see a lot of things there, and I'm just thinking it should be township.
I'll accept that as a friendly
point.
amendment.
Oh, yeah, I
Mhm.
forgot.
Good point.
Discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clements?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye, and the motion carried. Next, discussion and update on township policies.
No.
This was Paul Peroni's. He was asking for discussion and update on the township policy. Paul, do you have that
I
update?
have a couple of handouts.
Okay.
This has been a long time coming, and shame on us for not, maybe shame on me for not pushing it harder than I have. We have already been through 4 of the 8 sections that the MTA has suggested as board policies. Number 5 is entitled Personnel Administration. Now, we have already adopted, in fact, in January, a personnel policy handbook, and we all have a copy of it. However, there are some duplications between that policy and some of these. But there are a lot of them that are in here that are not in ours, and I guess my suggestion would be that I'll hand out a copy of Personnel Administration MTA's recommendation, and we can compare it to ours and make necessary adjustments. Even talk, maybe we don't even want to have number 5 in there, but take a read of it and then decide what we want to do with it. We don't want to have it duplicated, but we can always refer back to a policy that we've already adopted. So I'm going to hand out Section 5, which is Personnel Administration. In addition, then, the next one is 6, Section 6, which is entitled Records Management. These are just suggestions by Michigan Township Association in their policy handout. I'd like to hand that out also, so that board members can take a look at it and study it and do whatever they like. Then we need to set up at least 1 or 2 meetings to talk about these changes, make changes to them, as we've done with the first 4. I agree with Nancy wholeheartedly. We need to get this done. We've messed around with this for long enough, in fact, too long. So what are your thoughts, board members, on how we proceed with this? Does it make sense to look at 5 and compare it to the one we've already adopted as our personnel? There are some differences. We need to resolve those differences and scratch out so that we don't have duplication. 6 is brand-new territory for us. And again, these are just recommendations from Michigan Township Association. They don't have to be adopted verbatim. And we have not adopted them verbatim in the first 4 sections that we've already been through. We've made several wording changes. So I guess at this point, why don't we just take the 2 sections under advisement and come back maybe at the next meeting and with a couple of dates, suggestions that all of you folks can make to talk about these further. Does that make sense? If we have to get it started somehow.
Correct.
This will give you an idea. They're involved. They're some say they're very wordy. I agree they're wordy. A lot of legalese, I'm sure. But let's take a look at them and then move forward on it.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just for a real quick clarification, the items that are in blue and underlined, those are things that I believe we have already added.
We've made some changes to them. There are changes from
Because there's numbering changes and
they're-
everything.
Right.
I think those are the ones that we've either added or, such as, if you go to, the 3rd page in, which is page 38, go down 3/4 of the way, it's got 5.10 and 5.11 is a new number. I think we were okay with those at that point, and it became 511 because we inserted a new 5.10. So I think that, just for clarification for everybody, I think that's the path we were already down. So those probably are some of the highlighted areas to look at.
But we really didn't, in my recollection, we did not make a final determination.
No,
on
we didn't make
Section
a final.
5. So I think we need to at least look at it.
But these are the areas I think that it draws your
Correct.
attention to. Okay.
Any other discussion? Ms.
Just-
Minberry?
Just quickly, and maybe for Craig and TC's education, records management responsibilities is solely belongs to the clerk. And many of these things are already underway, and she takes very good care of the records retention and when to dissolve things. I'm not saying you shouldn't look at that. I'm just saying keep in mind that if we already have a policy on it, such as a FOIA policy or records retention policy she gets from the state, I would suggest we not even consider deviating from what the state says is the records retention. So some of these things I wouldn't get bogged down in if I were you, because when we set up a committee of the whole to meet on this, it's gonna, no point in wasting your time.
Right.
So,
Thank you, you read my mind.
That is correct. A lot of these are state mandated, and I have no choice, so.
right. And if she doesn't do it, she has to go to jail. So, I mean, I think she's probably gonna do it.
But yet, if you codify it and put it in one document, then future boards can refer to that. I don't think it ought to conflict with what the state says, that a lot of these things, maybe most of them, are already being done. But it just puts it in writing in one spot.
I would have to go over the FOIA to see if that is still up to date with the changes that they just made.
Yeah, there've been several changes, haven't there? Yeah,
A lot.
okay.
And then the record storage and disposal is all mandated by the state too.
Correct.
So, any other discussion? Seeing none, moving on. Close on 6602 Jackman Road property. I don't know if Marty wants to speak to this, or Mr. Bushman wanted to speak to this.
Maybe I could try to refresh everybody's memory where we are with respect to this project. I believe back in May of this year, a resolution was adopted by the board to move forward with entering into a purchase agreement for $65,000 to purchase the subject property at Stearns and Jackman for improvements that was consistent with receiving the state grant funds and the matching funds from the road commission for a roundabout. The purchase agreement was attached to that resolution and approved, and there was also directed in that resolution and in later motions that the environmental analysis of the property, a phase 1, a phase 2, be conducted, and those things have been done. There's been a couple amendments to the purchase agreement, and just adding additional time for analysis and review of the property. And the most recent amendment brings the due diligence period, which is the time for the purchaser to review and accept the condition of the property, or I should say, reject the condition of the property and indicate that they are not accepting the condition of the property and therefore not moving forward with the purchase. That time expires this coming Friday, September 20th. Closing must happen on or before October 2nd. I think they have a tentative closing date for early next week. So I guess at this point in time, I guess the board needs to either do nothing, which leaves the train on the tracks and the purchase agreement will move forward, or determine that it doesn't accept the condition of the property and wants to stop and not purchase it based upon the conditions in the amendment.
Thank you.
Our legal counsel, Tom Graham, sent us a letter suggesting that a simple motion just to move forward to conclude the purchase of the property would probably be enough to do tonight.
That would be the best scenario if you decide to move forward, clear the air, just to indicate that you are now telling your attorney and elected officials to move forward with and close the purchase.
And as far as any thing that the environmental study has found or not found, why, if we have this, I think it's called a baseline environmental assessment, I think that's been recommended, and we definitely need to do that, because that draws a line and says everything that happens after that, it's our responsibility. Everything happened before is not. So maybe Barry can help us with that decision, but I think that kind of a motion would be in order tonight, just to proceed.
Yes, correct. The baseline environmental assessment is in process. You approved that action at the last meeting. Basically, you're correct for layman's terms. I mean, yes, it draws a line in the sand, says, here's what we found before, here's what we're not responsible for. The good part is really there's only two issues on the site, primarily is that's the findings of some minor amounts of asbestos, and there was some groundwater testing that suggested it was slightly above residential standards. However, that could occur anywhere on site or anywhere that was tested. It wasn't necessarily site-specific. It could be attested across the street, and a lot of those are natural occurring metals in the soils and in the waters we have around here. But just as a protection for yourself, you file that assessment, and that draws your line in the sand, and you just need to recognize if you go to sell any portion of the property in the future, you just disclose those features.
Ms. Tinneberry?
I didn't have a letter from the attorney in my packet. I don't know who got the letter. I didn't get the letter. Did any other trustee get the letter?
I did.
You're not a trustee. So am I to assume that the full-time officials only got the letter?
The letter went out to the supervisor, the clerk, the treasurer, Barry, Marty, Bill, Tom.
Okay, well, I'd like the minutes to reflect that. I'm not too happy that the attorney did not notify everyone on the board. It's this board that makes decisions, not the 3 full-time officials, so just note in the minutes, please.
I agree with you on that, Nancy. You know how I hate to agree with you, but
Yeah,
I
I
agree.
know, I know.
No,
Well,
I think
please,
you're right.
please understand, it's not personal. Everybody seems to want to, not you, turn anything I say into a personal. It's a personal matter. It's not a personal matter. It's, to me, a legal matter that the board is the legal entity that should be informed. And Marty, I love you. I know you'd never do anything like that.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to have Tom Graham set a closing date no later than October 2nd, 2019, in regards to the purchasing of 6602 Jackman, 6602 Jackman.
Can I second it for discussion only? I don't think we ought to make that motion. I think we ought to make one that it just authorizes them to move forward to conclude the purchase, and that would include that date. That's already been set, I think. One of the memos that I got from the attorney says it's a tentative closing date of,
Tuesday, the 24th.
Tuesday,
at
the
11 o'clock.
24th at 11 a.m.
I'm fine with that. As an amendment, yeah, I'm fine with that.
And because frankly, we don't know what the exact amount of the check we're gonna have to write is. I don't know. Because there's some back taxes that they're gonna present to us at closing. Other things will be presented to us at closing that they will be reimbursing the township for or paying, and our net check would be just that, the net of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the amount of the check is gonna be, and I have to give them a check by that date. I've been told that the title company will get us that information so that we know, because I think Tom Graham is working on the closing document, closing statement, which will have all of that listed in it.
So Craig, would you be willing to rescind your motion and Paul can make it?
Yes.
Well, I'm not,
No.
I just
have
want to
more
move forward.
information.
I feel like we're just making a motion to have Tom Graham move forward with it. So maybe I put too many details on it.
And just one other point, I know it says in Mr. Peroni's memo that that it's not required that the baseline be sent to the state, but I hope we are.
It says before close.
But,
Before closing.
okay, but it will be in there. Okay. If
Barry,
we
did you want to
proceed.
say it?
I don't think it is.
I
I
don't-
think
and I-
that's something we have to have on file, and if the state wants to see it, we have to produce it.
The baseline environmental assessment will be filed with the state. The due care plan
that's-
is something you keep on your files for, in case the Eagle, or what is now Eagle from the old DQ, would want to see any of your records.
Okay, so it will be filed.
Correct.
Is the motion in order?
I think, did you rescind?
Yes, it
Did
is.
you rescind?
Unless it was
And
an
I'll-
amendment.
And I'll withdraw my second, so we're good. All right, that's not there.
Okay.
So you-
Then I guess I'd like to make a motion that we authorize our legal counsel to move forward and conclude the purchase of the property at Smith and Jackman.
I support.
Actually, you second the motion.
Second.
That's correct. call.
Motion by Francis, seconded by Mr. Montry. Discussion? Ms. Tinneberry?
Well, I've been opposed to this since the beginning, and I'd just like the minutes to reflect that. I continue to be opposed because I don't think the township should be buying property for resale.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mrs. Tinneberry?
No,
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clements?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye. Motion carried 5-1. Next up is the vouchers for payment. Mr. Francis, do you want to do that for
I
me?
would be glad to. Give me a second to,
Thanks, Barry.
thank you. Madam Chairperson, I'd like to make the motion to approve the following vouchers for the payment of the bills. The general fund in the amount of $65,479.34. Fire district fund, $20,912.25. Police fund, $1,587.21. The park fund, $10,742.96. The fire equipment millage fund, $20,653.48. The library fund, $3,223.68. Green Hills SAD, $5,200 even. Barbara Lee in Harmony, $2,362.50. The DDA Downtown Development Authority, $192.23. The Sewer O&M Fund, a large amount, $412,792.75, and included in that amount is $408,317, which is our bi-monthly operating expense that we pay to the Drain Commissioner. And finally, the Trust and Agency Fund, $544 even, for a grand total of $543,690.40.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Francis, supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion?
Right, I was gonna ask what the fire department was doing, spending all this money on uniforms and patches and pins, but I think I got my answer tonight.
Yeah, we saw 8 of them tonight.
With no other discussion, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clements?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye, and the motion carried. Next is the land combination of parcel number 5802-375-04800 and 5802-375-04900. Mr. Matlow?
Good evening. This request was from the property owners. This is a formality that we are required to do when this particular type of request comes forward. What this does is it puts this parcel under a restriction that one parcel cannot be sold without the other, because our ordinance doesn't allow a utility building to be built on a separate parcel on its own. The land division combination agreement has been pulled together over the years through our attorneys, and this is what we're presenting to you tonight. The formal draft, final draft, will be sent to the attorneys for them to review and finalize anything that we may have missed. If there's any questions, please feel free to ask.
Is there any questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I'd like to move that we approve the land division combination request for Mr. and Mrs. Baden on supervisor's replat of D.T. Nepper Farm addition to the village of Lambertville as recorded in Library 9, page 16, Monroe County Records for parcel 58-02-375-048-00 vacant, and parcel number 58-02-375-049-00 with the existing home.
Second.
Anything more than that?
Motion by Ms. Tinneberry, seconded by Mr. Steiner. Discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Yes.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carries.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Next is the tentative preliminary plat reapproval for Hickory Creek Plat 5. Nancy, did you want to take that?
Sure. Well, it's pretty self-explanatory in the minutes. I'm sure you've all read them thoroughly. It's a reapproval because needs to be reapproved before we can approve the final because of the time limit, I believe, in
Correct. It
okay, the
expired.
time. We did another one at the last meeting, and I'm getting confused. Because of the time limit in terms of publishing. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the, whoops, got the wrong one there.
Yeah.
Or is that the final?
The tentative, we have to reapprove first.
Okay, that's up here, sorry. Motion to approve the tentative preliminary plat approval for Hickory Creek Plat 5 on parcel numbers 5802-035-014-00 and 5802-035-015-00 and a portion of 5802-035-011-00 located on Stearns Road, east of Lewis Avenue.
I'll support.
Motion by Ms. Tinneberry, seconded by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried. Following along, it's now the final preliminary plat approval for Hickory Creek Plat 5.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the final preliminary plat for Hickory Creek Plat 5 on parcel numbers 5802-035-014-00 and 5802-035-015-00 and a portion of 5802-035-11-00 located on Stearns Road, east of Lewis Avenue, contingent upon all the issues outlined in the Monroe County Road Commission, Monroe County Drain Commission, the Manikin-Smith Group review, and the Bedford Township Fire Department letters. All those things shall be addressed and necessary permits be secured from Eagle prior to final plat approval.
Second.
That's Eagle.
Used to be DEQ.
Excuse me. DEQ, that
It used-
EGLE is DEQ?
It used to be DEQ, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have a motion by Ms. Tinneberry, seconded by Mr. Steiner. Any discussion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis,
Aye.
Mr. Clemens,
Aye.
Mr. Montroy,
Aye.
and Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried.
And hopefully that eagle has landed safely over there.
I was curious who was going to say
And good luck on the economy to make it happen.
Next is E, reapproval to rezone parcel number 5802-022-03800 from R2B to PBO. And this is a reapproval.
So this is, the survey did not come in time due to the lapse and for the 15 days that they needed to publish. So this has to be reapproved also.
Correct.
So my motion is, due to the original approval missing the publication deadline, I move to approve the request of Bedford Public Schools for rezoning of parcel number 5802-022-038-00 from R2B, One Family Residential Zoning District, to PBO, Professional Business Office Zoning District, located on the south side of Temperance Road and east of Jackman Road, otherwise known as 1575 West Temperance Road, Temperance, Michigan, 48182, as it is a good repurposing of the building in that area, no significant impact on the area, and recommended by the Bedford Township Planner, Lucy Fortin's review letter.
Support.
Motion by Ms. Tinneberry, second by Mr. Clemens. Discussion?
Just to clarify, if anyone didn't know about all this before, it's the Temperance Road, former Temperance Road Elementary School on Temperance Road.
Seeing none, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Tinneberry,
Aye.
Mr. Clemens,
Aye.
Mr. Montroy,
Aye.
Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Mr. Francis,
Aye.
and Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried. F, renewal of the agreement for video production services with George Welling. Attached is his contract. This is identical to the last one we signed with one exception. The contract fee was $22,000. He is asking for it to be increased to $30,000. We do have it in our budget. It was budgeted at 35, and he also included some of the things that he has done over this last 2 years with some of the hours that he has put into these projects. Ms. Tinneberry?
Okay. I don't have a problem with the increase in the contract wages, salary, whatever the correct term is. But my concern is that the agreement is for 20 hours a week, 1,040 hours, and that continues, correct?
Correct.
My concern is that he works, a normal 40-hour-a-week, 52-week-a-year person works 2,080 hours. He worked 2,488 hours. I have a problem with that for a couple reasons. One, if we're paying him for 1,040 hours, I hate to see him more than double his workload for the same amount. Yeah, did you have,
Is this for 2 years, these numbers?
no.
This is how many hours he put into each
In
thing.
1
for a
year?
total.
2018-19 at the top of the page.
I know, but is that the year of
That's your fiscal
2018
year.
and the 2019, or a fiscal 1 year?
Fiscal one.
Okay.
So I'm not sure, I'm certainly not asking to bring a time clock or something, but I mean, some of these things, like 400 hours in the control room and camera, that's 400 hours, certainly not for meetings. Yeah, that's.
didn't
I'm
wanna
looking for
interrupt
some
you.
No, please interrupt me. That's-
A lot of this time that he put in to begin with was setting up the system, getting it running. If there's a problem, he comes in, he works with the tech team to try and fix the problem. So that's probably a lot of these hours. If we want, we could bring him to the podium and ask. But
Yeah.
I know that he's told me that a lot of these hours were setting up the equipment when we first put it together, getting it running, getting it working. There were a lot of issues in the beginning that he put a lot of hours into, so those hours will decrease now that everything's set up
Okay.
and working.
Again, and you're not doing this, I'm not saying, but please, I seem to, everybody think it's a personal thing. I like George a lot. I think he's a wonderful, just what you're saying. He put in a lot of extra time for $22,000. I mean, most of us wouldn't work for that. And all these hours, my concern is going forward, that we find a way to, and I'm not saying George can't monitor his own time either. Please, don't twist around what I'm saying here. I'm saying that he needs to remain close to this 1,040 hours, as close as possible, because if it can't be done, if it's something that can't be done in those hours, I also don't want him to not put down the hours that he's working. You know what I'm saying? I think he needs to be fair to us, we need to be fair to him as well. And so, you know, some of this, the training hours, 175 hours, that's a lot of training. Maybe we need to be looking at hiring somebody else that is already trained, or when I added up these hours, I thought, good grief, this is a two-person thing.
Correct.
Because it's 2,400 hours, so.
Correct. And some of the training, again, was the new equipment we received, and we wanted him trained on it to make sure
Oh,
that.
him being trained, I thought
Yes.
this was him training someone else.
No,
Oh,
no, he
okay,
took training
okay.
to make sure that we were up to date on everything.
Okay, I didn't know that, I thought he was.
And then we just get Lori for free.
Yeah. Okay, that's all that was my concern about the number of hours.
Any
The
other
contract
comments?
doesn't say 20 hours, it says a minimum of.
Yeah, that's minimum.
Correct.
But I agree with Nancy, if it takes 40 hours to get the job done, we ought to reconsider this. But only George can bring that to our attention, and we should ask him to.
Right.
And I agree with what Trudy said, because there's a lot of startup time with this. We created something from nothing, and now we need to keep it going. So I don't see a lot of those hours being repeated in setting up.
Correct. No more discussion, I'd look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the agreement for delivery of professional services by George W. Welling, 8390 Lambert Drive, as presented, with the total fees also changed from the last contract as presented in this new agreement.
I'll support.
Motion by Steiner, seconded by Clement, discussion?
It is
Mr.
a
Francis?
2-year agreement, right? Everybody
Correct,
find it?
2 years.
What is the percentage increase?
It's probably about 25 by the time you look at it.
Like to call a question if there are no other?
He's
No,
looking
go
at the
ahead.
percentage. While we're meeting, Madam Chair, I just was gonna say, I'm absolutely in support of this, because I think it's an invaluable service. I know myself, I frequently look back at meetings online to look at exactly how things were worded, what somebody said. And I think the public who watches appreciates, you know, particularly during the winter time or inclement weather, not necessarily having to come out to see these. So I think it's a very, very valuable service, and one I appreciate, because it does help us do our job that much better.
Are you sure it wasn't to make sure your tie was straight, or? looking
Well,
back at
sadly,
it-
this doesn't give him a lot to work with,
Yeah.
so he's,
Turn the lights down a little bit.
yeah, a lot.
Can you please call the roll?
He was
It's about-
looking for the.
it's
He was
about
waiting for a
36.
percentage.
Please call the roll.
Okay. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montry,
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery,
Aye.
Mr. Francis,
Aye.
and Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried. G, approval of Excel Fire Systems invoice to install a fire department connection at the Bedford Branch Library. Craig? do you
Yeah,
want this?
I'll take this, and then I'll probably have Chief come up, which, yeah. So this came to the Library Advisory Board at our last meeting, that we had some, Excel Fire Systems was doing a inspection on the library. They had, and the fire marshal was there present, came up with 3 violations. That one was something that we've been working on forever, and we're chasing our tail trying to get something fixed that it should have been done a long time ago. And then the 2 other were a fire department connection sign for the standpipe, and the standpipe threading, which the standpipe is more or less your fire hydrant for the building for the fire department to connect to, that the threading on that standpipe for that building is incorrect, which is the most mind-blowing thing. How that's possible, it like blows my mind. But it was like, okay, well, obviously you got to fix it. Okay, we looked it up at the meeting, and it was like one of the guys on the library advisory board looked it up on his phone and said, it's like $40. You can get one of those for like $40 at Lowe's. And so he said, okay, well, like I'll report it, and I'll talk to Al tomorrow, and we'll go from there. So I called Al Pryor the next morning and kind of gave him the lowdown, said, hey, could you have Pat like go look at this and get this figured out? And I said, you can probably get the adapter for $40 at Lowe's, but go do whatever. And they Excel had advised that we call Excel. And I said at the meeting, I said, no, we're not, like, why would we call the company that does the inspection and buy a product from them? That just makes no sense to me. So when I talked to Al, he's like, all right, well, whatever. And I told him, don't call. I said, don't, like, go back to Excel. Let's, like, that just doesn't make any sense. Like, go have Pat install the adapter, and like, we're good to go. And he's like, oh, well. So then this comes in the packet, and I called Al, and he said, well, like, I kind of gave it to Pat, and he said, that's what it is. So I said, I guess we'll discuss it at the meeting. So personally, I'd rather spend $2,000 and get the exact same thing done than have the company who does the inspection sell us some, like, I just don't understand the thing at all. And then I ended up looking up, you can get adapters for like $40 online. And so I don't know the details outside of that. If there's a reason why we would go this route, my opinion would be run the opposite direction, and they're gonna, part of their quote is, they have 5 years of testing, which I don't know how you test. You're gonna run water through it for 2 hours. That's not worth $1,000 to me.
Can you shine a little light on this subject for us?
I just have a quick question. Has this been a problem since the building was built?
Well, that's what I don't know. After I was talking to Jody the other week, and she said, I forget if it was her husband she had talked to, that it's possible that Toledo's fire department used to cover some of this area, which I don't remember that, and I don't know if that's, but from my understanding, the threading on that has been wrong since that building was built, which like I said, I don't even know how that's possible.
Chief?
I think Mr. Montry explained the situation, or explained what Captain Steinman had found to a T as part of some work that was being done out there. He discovered that the threading isn't compatible with the hoses we carry, simply meaning that if there was a fire there, we wouldn't have the ability to connect and feed that fire suppression system. So
You might-
I would certainly agree that it's something that we would want to address and want to make sure we get taken care of. We'd just be making assumptions to know how far back that problem stems, but I would assume during construction, the wrong threaded fitting was installed, and it's gone undiscovered for a number of years.
Do you know this Excel fire system, why they would charge $13.55?
I wouldn't know. Now, we've got to understand though, just the maintenance department can't just install that. You need to be a licensed fire protection installation company to perform work on sprinkler systems, but I don't know.
Do you have that certification?
No, sir. No, ma'am, sorry. So it's got to be a licensed company, no different than if you brought an electrician in to do electrical work or something like that. So, but I wouldn't want to claim to be an expert on the installation of fire protection systems, so I'd be very hesitant to weigh in on the pricing that Excel sent over.
Now, I was told by Jody that this is half the cost that they normally do with that other, with the wrong threaded one. Did you talk to Jody, Nancy? No. Maybe it was Pat talked to her and said that this is half the cost. If we go with them, for the next 5 years, their testing would be half the price that it is now. Is that because they have the wrong threads, maybe?
I was, Mr. Thatcher was the one that handled the coordination, so aside from identifying it, or Doug identifying it, we haven't been involved up to this point, so I wouldn't even want to venture a guess.
Now, what is the Excel's doing the inspection there, correct?
I believe they do the annual inspection on all of our systems. I think that it's the township's contracted company, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
So they're doing the inspections on our buildings. So, and that's an annual inspection, correct?
Correct, yes.
How does the inspection company be the one that sells the products that they fix?
So no differently than
This is not you.
No,
I'm just
no,
like, this just seems like the most convoluted thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I can't believe that when was that library built? Who's installing that? I feel like that person needs to get a call.
So I understand what you're saying, but the inspection must be completed by that same, so the companies would do both. Similar to like a fire extinguisher company that would come through and inspect our extinguishers. If they found a problem with one, they have the ability to also, while they're doing the inspection, to also make a repair to an extinguisher. So it would be the similar way, or even like our AEDs, I guess. So annually, we have our AEDs checked to make sure that there are no problems with it and they're functioning properly. If we identify a problem, the same inspecting company would do it. So I don't know in that of it makes sense, but I can equate it to some other areas.
Do you know what the thread is on that standpipe? Do you know which one is there now? Because your national standard threading is what you guys have for your hoses, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but do you know what that is?
I'm not sure. My apologies, Captain Steinman couldn't be here tonight.
I
don't know what the
I should have
thread is.
I should have asked that. I was pulling that up to look up because I wanted to just find what would be that I'm actually looking at the correct adapters or whatever, and I wanted to be able to have that, so I was printing that stuff off even today. But I was just curious, national standard threading seems like the kind of threading I would use for fire systems.
So it's largely driven by the fire department or the hose threads that they carry. So different departments see, some of them historically have carried different threads on their hose. I think Detroit carries a completely different thread. I think Toledo may carry a completely different thread.
Do you think that's why they would have like ever put that on there? That was just befuddling.
Yeah, I wouldn't even want to guess. I'm sure it just was either shipped or ordered in error at the time that it was constructed, would be my guess, and nobody caught it until now.
Yeah, it's hard to say whether that standpipe was from the original library or the rebuilt library. If it's from the original library, I can see probably why it would be so outdated.
And that
And
it
the other
might
thing to
fit
note is
Toledo.
that because it's a correct thread, it's not our correct thread, they're gonna come in, it's gonna thread correctly, and it's gonna pass their inspection because it is a standard within the fire service, it's just not our standard. And that's where you can have two trains that miss each other in the night, because it just
Well,
never.
it's whoever, I mean, it
And
would
it all
be, it
falls back
wouldn't
to
be
who
on,
it got
it wouldn't
originally.
be on the I don't think,
Right.
yeah, it would be on the, like,
It's the original
how are you gonna,
installation.
it's the original installation, unless it was like an actual original installation and it had something to do with that. Is there any reason why, like, you wouldn't put an adapter on? Do you guys, oh, that was a question. Do you guys have adapters for your hoses at all already?
I would have to check and see, because again, I'm not sure what the thread is that's on there. Supposing that we could order an adapter that goes from our national standard to the other thread, and it necessitated carrying another adapter on the trucks and ordering those on all the trucks. It would be one option.
I would just put it on the standpipe.
I don't know if it would financially or even logistically make sense. The reason that we have standards is so that no matter what building we pull up to, we're not hunting and searching for threads, the hose simply connects to it. So I wouldn't want to necessarily say our preference would be to have to be checking different threading in different buildings.
No,
I
I
can
would-
certainly understand that, you may want to weigh that. I could follow up with some information, but
I would think if you got the adapter, when you put the adapter on the standpipe, I was just curious if you guys already carried like adapters for like these kind of situations, but like I said, I would think you'd get the adapter for the actual standpipe. Like I said, I'd rather spend $5,000 on getting it fixed than buy something from this company in all honesty. That just seems,
Why would you want to spend $5,000 rather than buying from this company for the $13.55?
well, if I'm gonna do that, I wanna spend $40 and get an adapter, because I don't like that
Will
the
the
inspection
adapter pass?
company is who's selling the solutions to their inspections. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy,
No,
but
I
I
want
just
to ask
don't,
a clarifying
that just
question,
doesn't
because
make
I'm
sense to
lost.
me.
How is it any different than you get a brake repair from the dealership you bought your car? Or you get a spa or a jacuzzi repair from the company that you bought I'm
Because
lost.
it's
I don't
not,
understand.
because it's not a government mandate that the mechanic come to my house and check my wheels.
Well, we don't have to
but-
buy from them, we have a choice.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I
Right.
wouldn't.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood where you were going.
And the one thing the chief said too, though, I mean, you've got a company that has to be certified. You can have a $3 adapter, you can have a $3,000 adapter, but if a company's not certified, that's gonna back that up, and this has a 5-year testing to it as well. So it makes it their responsibility for that to be monitored on a yearly basis. You talked about getting an adapter, and if you put it on the standpipe, well, it's not something you just wanna leave on the standpipe, because what happens if somebody happens to go take it off?
Then we'd be in the situation we've been in for 15 years.
But it's not something you can lock on there that's going to stay on there. So I agree with the chief, though. If I'm fighting a fire, and especially if it's dark, even worse, and you're fumbling around in a truck, where's that doggone adapter at? Joe put it in the back compartment instead of the front compartment or whatever. Seconds and minutes can make a big difference. And whatever it is, we've got to have a standard that we're gonna have on that standpipe. So if anything happens to that library, these guys are on top of it in seconds, not wasting even 30 seconds trying to find an adapter.
No, I would agree with that. I would say you get the adapter, you weld it on, and it's on, you spent $40. What is am I belittling their
Here again-
testing, or is their testing?
Here again, though, with all due
Running-
respect, you're not gonna weld somebody's adapter onto that standpipe because welding distorts metal. As soon as you do that, you're
Can't come off.
gonna have issues potentially down the road with metal. I mean, I work in a business that has forging operations and heat treating services, and I'll tell you what, you don't realize what heat does to metal. And stress cracks, anything else, so if it's not gonna be an exact part, I don't want anything to do with it.
Chief, for their testing, their 5-year testing, they're running water through it.
I believe it's an air test, a 150 PSI air test. Or I'm sorry, it's not running water through it, it's hydrostatically testing it, so yes, 150 pounds. So they would pump the system up to 150 PSI and make sure that it held that pressure for a span of 2 hours. According to the NFPA requirements, the 25 standard, which is for sprinkler systems, it's required, I believe, on a 5-year basis. So the system would have to be taken down, it would be taken offline for the period where they could set up for the testing. They would perform the testing, they'd leave the test on for 2 hours, and make sure that it holds that price, that there's no leaks. Because, as I'm sure you understand, like the city water that we have is running at, I don't know, maybe 60 or 70 PSI when it's running into our houses or running into the library in that system. But when we hook a fire engine up to it, sometimes we can increase or we can run our pumps up much higher. And so they try to ensure that we're not going to have leaks in the system if we would make a connection, and or they're required to make sure that the system can handle the increased pressure from the pumps of our fire engines.
Ms. Tinneberry, you had a question?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate Craig's scrutiny of this. I had something smelled fishy to me when, that's probably not politically correct. Fish might dislike that, but anyway, something didn't look right to me when I looked this over too. So, I applaud him for his scrutiny and his desire to save money. However, my other and the fact, does this company come every year? They just all of a sudden discovered it? I mean, something didn't look right to me with this company. However, it's my opinion that we do need a professional to do this. I don't think it's just as simple as going and buying something with the right threads and putting it on. I can imagine I wouldn't want to do that. So I think for this instance, we should move ahead to get this fixed and then keep our eye on Excel fire systems. Sorry, but something didn't seem right to me either.
Chief, is this something that you know other companies that can do?
Not off the top of my head where I would give you
Okay.
3 or 4, but there are other companies that do the same work, certainly, as Excel. My assumption is because when they were doing their inspections, it was discovered, when the inspector was there, or when they were doing their testing, when Excel was, at the time it was discovered. Again, I don't want to speak for the maintenance department, but my assumption was, at that time, if they said, hey, your fittings don't fit this building and you wouldn't be able to supply it with water, my guess is that we asked them to get some pricing around to make it right. But again, I'm going to be very cautious in just jumping to conclusions because I was not involved.
My thinking is that Doug discovered it. Doug has been an excellent inspector. I'm thinking he discovered it and said, pointed out to him, and they go, oh yeah, we've been looking at that for years and didn't notice that. I just think that we should move forward to get it done, but be cautious.
If you'll make a motion, I'll second.
Okay. Sorry, Craig.
Oh, my goodness.
I move that we approve the quote by Excel Fire Systems for the connection at the Bedford Library to install a new FDC national standard compatible with local fire department connections, and they provide a 5-year testing per the requirements for $1,355.
Support.
Motion by Tinnevery, second by Clemens. Discussion?
I got one.
Mr. Francis?
Thank God we haven't had to use that since the
Yeah.
building was built.
Wouldn't have been able to. Can I have the minutes reflect that firehosedirect.com offers same-day shipping and has the adapter for $40?
But do they install it?
Do they screw a thing onto another thing?
The
I don't
chief
know.
just said you got to be
Yeah.
certified.
You have to be certified.
So if Pat had put it on last night when no one was looking and then put the cap on,
And then it
That's not
I
didn't
bet
certified.
pass.
know who's gonna come unscrew it.
And then it didn't pass. Then what?
Didn't pass Excel's, doesn't pass Excel's. Oh my goodness.
And then have a
This is the
liability
most
issue if it
convoluted.
fails.
Right.
Call the question, please.
Wait, chief's got a comment.
If I may, I certainly appreciate Mr. Montra's opinion. However, I have been very, very specific with Ketten Steinman and all of our inspectors that we do not treat our buildings, including the fire stations, any differently on inspections than we would any other business or any other building in the township. So that's been the direction that we've given, is that we make sure that we're consistent and we hold ourselves, like I said, including the fire station, to the same standard that we hold all of the business owners in the township. So.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Ms. Tinnevery,
Aye.
Mr. Clemens,
Aye.
Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Mr. Francis,
Aye.
Mr. Montroy,
No.
and Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye. And the motion carried 5-1. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Moving on to H, approval of 6 tax millage resolutions for the 2019 tax roll. There must be 6 separate board actions. Mr. Francis, did you want to start
I'd
this
be
out?
glad to if you'd like me to. There are 6 almost identical motions to be made, each one for a different fund, as you see on the cover sheet. So I guess I move that we adopt the tax levy resolution for the general fund for the 2019 tax roll in the amount of .7767 mils.
Support.
Motion by Francis, seconded by Tinnevery. Discussion?
I just have a question, and this will take all of them. The one that we have in our packet differs. Could you tell me how the differ?
The,
I guess I could.
Third one.
I was going to say, the assessor miscalculated some of the numbers, so
Okay.
he gave us new numbers, so the resolution had to be changed to reflect those new numbers.
Okay, that's what I thought. Just to take some load off the assessor, this happened throughout the county. Almost every single township had the same thing.
Right.
So, you know, it wasn't a reflection necessarily on the calculation of the, that's what I
Correct.
thought. I just wanted to be sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Francis,
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery,
Aye.
Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Mr. Montroy,
Aye.
Mr. Clemens,
Aye.
and Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried.
I make a motion that we approve the levy amount for the fire district fund in the amount of .9810 mils as presented.
Support.
Motion by Francis, second by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis,
Aye.
Mr. Clemens,
Aye.
Mr. Montroy,
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery,
Aye.
Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
and Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried.
I'd now like to make a motion that we approve the levy amount for the 2019 tax roll for the transit system, which is Lake Erie Transit, in the amount of .2414 mils.
No, read that again.
No, no.
.2414.
This one says .2441.
Do you have the new
That's the
one
old
in
one.
front of you, or
That's the
the old
original.
one?
This is,
Is that the one that was on the desk tonight?
I crossed off the wrong one, sorry.
Second.
Forgive me.
Motion by Francis, second by Steiner. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montright?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried.
I'd like to make another motion to approve the levy for the police fund for the 2019 tax roll in the amount of .3922 mils as presented.
Support.
Motion by Francis, seconded by Mr. Clemens. Any discussion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montright?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried.
Another motion, do we make a motion that we approve the tax levy for the 2019 tax roll for the fire capital equipment fund in the amount of .4972 mils as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Francis, second by Mr. Steiner. Discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Montright?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried.
And the last one is to approve the levy request for the 2019 tax rolls for the library fund in the amount of .2486 mils as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Francis, second by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montright?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carried. Next is comments from the public. Comments are limited to 5 minutes for each individual. Please come on up.
Good evening, Logan Tisdale, 1308 Brandywine Street, Tempest, Michigan. This is in regards to the Monroe County Sheriff Contract Service Summary for August 2019. It took them 4 hours to stop one car in August. Took them 6.5 hours to write one traffic citation. There were 12 people that logged hours on the contract. There were 2 people that wrote the lion's share of the traffic citations. One officer wrote 43 traffic citations for 76.5 hours on patrol, which is better than one traffic citation for under 2 hours on patrol. Another officer wrote 37 traffic citations for 79 hours on patrol. And that was just shy of 1 for 2. So those 2 guys wrote 80 traffic citations under 2 hours for each traffic citation. There were 375 hours logged by the Sheriff's Department, other deputies, who didn't absolutely write one single traffic citation. One officer went 65 hours on patrol, which was well over half the time he worked, didn't write one single traffic ticket. One officer went 22.75 hours on patrol, which was about a fourth of what he worked, not one single traffic ticket. One officer went 70.5 hours on patrol, which was over half of what he worked, not a single traffic ticket. One officer went 77 hours on patrol, which was well over half of what he worked, not a single traffic ticket. One officer went 58.75 hours on patrol, which was more than a third of what he worked, and not a single traffic ticket. One officer went 81 hours on patrol, and that was well over half the time he worked, not a single traffic ticket. $16,000, not a single traffic ticket. 2 guys go out there, write 80 tickets, which is the lion's share. I think there was 125 written by the contract officers. They write the lion's share. These other guys, what are they doing? That's equivalent of one guy working over 9 weeks on patrol, not taking a single complaint, riding around in a marked patrol car with a radar, Bedford Township, and not writing one single ticket. It's amazing to me that, you know, you spend all this time talking about all these other things, and when it costs the township $16,000 for no performance, nobody says a word about it. You have the fire chief comes out here, he's the expert in fire enforcement here in this township. He answers questions all the time about what's going on and what they're doing. You spend a lot of time talking to him, he gives excellent answers. Who's the expert on this? Me? If those guys, if they would've went out there and wrote one ticket for every 2 hours on patrol, I would've never been up here. That would've been a blessing to this board, I bet. But you know what? I'm gonna come up here and I'm gonna bang the gavel every time they come up here and they ride around for 375 hours on patrol in Bedford Township and don't write a single traffic ticket. That is ludicrous. Who holds these people accountable? Who on the board is willing to step up and say, you know what, Logan? You're absolutely right. You've been talking about this for 2.5 years, and you know what? You're absolutely right. What are you doing for 375 hours and don't see a single traffic? Do you think that makes it safer in Bedford Township? 43 accidents last month, in August. It's ridiculous. Over 500 accidents every year. Nobody says nothing. You worry about something at the library, a fixture for something, I don't even know what you're talking about. You spend a lot of time talking about that, but we're not talking about the lives and the safety of the people out here that we pay a sheriff's department a ton of money every year to keep us safe, and they don't even write a single traffic ticket in 375 hours. It's ludicrous. To keep on contracting with these people and not holding them accountable, to me, is not right on this board. If you want their endorsement, and that's more important than my safety and the well-being of the people in this township, then maybe you shouldn't be on the board. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move on to comments from township board members. Mr. Clemens?
Just two things. Congratulations to all the firefighters who were sworn in tonight. It's amazing when you think in terms of legacy the Bedford Fire Department has. It's amazing, and excited for all of them to begin their career. I also want to say, Chief, I appreciate you pointing out that we hold ourselves to the same standards that we enforce. I get, and I agree with you, that sometimes the disparity between what we could go do it for ourselves and what we have to pay to get it done for in bureaucracy it's jaw-dropping, that's a good word. But it still means you have to comply with the code and you have to do what the state regulates. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Montry?
Well, I think no, I'm just joking. Yeah, I think that was awesome. Just like the generational service through the fire department as a really cool thing to think about and see the family members like kind of passing on that legacy. That's really cool. And then I would like to personally and publicly thank Chief and his team. On behalf of my wife's family, they had a member of the family pass the past week, and the entire family was just like overwhelmed with how fast everything was, how great the bedside manner and everything involved of Chief and his team had, and just wanted to be able to say thank you, like how much her family appreciated it. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Tinneberry?
I have a few things here, sorry. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank and congratulate the new inductees on the fire department as well. I've been around here long enough to know some of those grandfathers that pinned their grandsons, and I honestly gave me goosebumps to see the families and the carried down. My husband taught one of the fathers that pinned it on his daughter. I mean, it's just incredible to, yeah, he's older than I am, that's fine. It's just incredible to see the honor in their families of being on the fire department and how that carries on through the families. And it just, it's one of the exciting and rewarding parts of this job, one of the very few exciting and rewarding parts of this job, actually. And I thank you for your leadership in that regard. I have been meeting with the planning department and the ordinance department on behalf of bringing forth additional ordinances. I've mentioned this in past meetings, and on the next agenda, I will have a couple ordinances that have been suggested through the ordinance department, and based on the new policy that we have, I'm bringing them to the board to determine whether the board wants to follow through and develop policy or ordinances in that regard. So if when they when you get your packet, if you would consider looking them over, because it's something that I think this board has to take quite a bit of time, not more than one meeting, but some time thinking and considering how these ordinances would impact our residents. So, and do we need them? Do we need them or don't we need them? So this board needs to decide that. In conjunction with the ordinances, we have a sign ordinance that's been being worked on for a long time. And we met to discuss that, and Trudy was there, clerk was there with us, and brought some excellent points out about political signs that needs to be incorporated or decided by this board before the next election season takes place, and putting out signs as far in advance of the actual election. So we need to be focused on getting the sign ordinance together. And I'm not sure how to go about the whole timing issue. The planning department looks at the ordinances, the ordinance department looks at them, the planning commission looks at them, and the attorneys look at them. And so there's this ongoing step-by-step that ends up taking a considerable amount of time. So my suggestion is going to be that we, once this board looks at them and puts forth the decision of what we need to do, then I think there needs to either be a policy or some kind of time limit placed on the rest of that. It has to be back by this time, which means putting a time limit on the attorney's office as well at some point, so that we can, the sign ordinance has gone on like this board policy, and it's not anyone's fault. I'm not, because it would go to the attorney, it would come back to the planning department, and they'd get bogged down in other things. So we just need to have some stipulation placed on all that so that we can be moving forward, and we don't have this long delay in coming up with the solution. And then at the last board meeting, I believe it's the last board meeting, Mr. Clements talked about Robert's Rules of Order and how that is instigated. To the best of my knowledge, this board has never adopted Robert's Rules, nor adopted a variation of Robert's Rules. There's a firm Robert's Rules, and then there's Robert's Rules amended. And so while I agree with the fact that some of Robert's Rules is important to follow, I also agree that the way this board operates doesn't lend itself to a hard and fast Robert's Rules. So I think that's something that at some point in time this board needs to decide. Which brings me to my comment to thank Trudy tonight. I have to say that this was a pleasant meeting for me, because I was able to speak my opinion and not be interrupted, not be argued with. And so I totally appreciate having the meetings run in this fashion, that each board member has the right and the responsibility, I should say, even more so, to express their thinking and feeling. A board needs to be diverse. A board needs to have different opinions. When I hear someone else's opinion, many times, it changes my mind. It draws me to a different conclusion. It lets me open up my mind a little rather than having the narrow thoughts that I've had. So I think that everyone should have an opportunity to speak their opinion and not be interrupted. And again, I think it's the responsibility of this board to hold hard and fast to that rule. Being a monitor or a moderator of a meeting doesn't give any more privileges than anyone else who has the floor. And then lastly, this will be a question, because I don't know, and maybe it won't be able to be answered tonight, but I've read many emails, many of you have gotten the same emails about Facebook and Facebook language. I got off of Facebook because it was so mean and cruel, and I didn't want to waste my time reading that kind of thing. My question is, are there official township Facebook pages? Because I don't get on, so I don't know.
Yes.
And on those township Facebook pages, let me just say it this way, this board needs to adopt some kind of policy and rules that our residents are not talked about meanly or said disrespectful things or held. I know that you can stop that on a Facebook page or delete it, and whoever controls those is there more than one?
No.
One Facebook page.
Yes.
Whoever is in control of that Facebook page should also be responsible for deleting any kind of hurtful and cruel, I don't care who it is or if that other person is not well liked by anybody. It doesn't matter. They're still a citizen resident of this township. And I'm appalled to think that that would be permitted and allowed on any township Facebook page, anything that mentions or says it's Bedford Township. That's all. Thank
All right.
you.
If I can just,
Yeah, please.
there is something out there that I just read. It's from the state, and it talks about, because I do FOIAs, it's in there about Facebook and how to handle it. And this board is going to have to decide, do we want to keep letting comments go? Because if so, we cannot delete.
Oh, you can't delete?
No. We can choose now that we don't want our Facebook to have comments where it's just simply information. No one has the authority to comment on it. Then we're good. But this board will have to decide what we want that Facebook to be. Do we want people to comment? Because if so, we can't delete.
Well, I'd like to see that on the next board agenda, then. I think that's something that we need to deal with
So
as soon as
I'll
possible.
find that article and I'll send it to each one of you so you have it, so you can at least look it over and see your thoughts.
Thank
And then we
you.
can go from there.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
It just came through maybe a couple weeks ago, I saw it. So I'll find it again and share it. Mr. Steiner?
Well, I have to agree with Ms. Tinvery. I don't go on Facebook either, just because people hide behind Facebook. It's easy to type and walk away, and there's no accountability to it. And people can say what they want. They can, I would even say sometimes probably go as far as almost being slanderous, and they get away with it. In today's society, people just don't care. So I refuse to be on that kind of social media, 100%, I agree with you. Also, Ms. Tinvery, I wasn't at the last meeting, so I didn't have a chance to review it. But as the last meeting that I attended, I made a comment at the end of the meeting about civility, and we need to get back on that track and make sure that we continue to do that as a board. Proof in the pudding tonight, Ms. Tinvery looked at the capital improvement plan. She said, you know what, I don't care, everybody on the opposite person's proposal, they've got qualifications, let's get this thing moving forward. And she wasn't digging in hard and fast that it's my way or the highway. So we just need to work together and take more attitude like that more often. Not to say that you always just say, go ahead and just do it all your way, but let's not argue about it. Let's do the smart things and do the best for the township. And again, close things out and make things move to put a plan into place so we can get this moving forward, this case, the capital improvement plan, get it to our planning commission so they can do their job. I've had a couple complaints recently, and Trudy and Paul, if you could pass this on to the supervisor's department, or Paul, if you could even maybe look into it, since Mr. Peroni's on vacation. Couple of complaints. One of them is the line striping on the roads. When is that going to happen? Got a lot of complaints, especially on Stearns Road. And I know myself, as I travel Stearns Road every morning out to the east, it gets pretty dark out there, and there's that little bit of S-curve out there, and I swear to God, people are coming at my side all the time on that in the mornings. So we really need to look into that and any other roads that need striping. Also, another complaint I had was after some heavy rains, looking around some of these major intersections, and Lewis Avenue's had some opportunities to look at, that there are some major weeds growing along in the cracks between the pavement and the curb and the gutter area, that it literally makes it flood, and then it puts ponding out into the road. Number one, it's not good for the road. Number two, it's not good for somebody to hit those ponding areas, and people can lose control of their car. So that's something for the road commission also that they need to start looking into, as they are supposed to maintain those roads. And last but not least, I won't repeat it all what has been said about this new group of firefighters coming in. The only thing I will add to that is it actually chokes you up a little bit to see that family member, that they're following the legacy, and just to see that father, mother or grandfather come in, and just the love they have for their family and appreciate and passing it on. And you can just tell those young kids are going to succeed because they've got that role model that brought them here.
Thank you. Mr. Francis?
To respond to one of Rick's questions as far as the road striping, that is on the docket to be done. The road commission contracts that out, and they do them all at once, or in a big batch, rather than one by one as a road's completed. So that will be done, because I think that's very important. Because it's hard to see the edge of the road at night, or if it's wet. So that will be done, and that's why we're still waiting for the contractor to get moving on it. Another thing I wanted to mention is, yesterday was the last day to pay your real estate taxes for the summer without penalty or interest. And as of the close of business yesterday, we've taken in about 94, almost 95% of the total. That's right in line with what it is every year. I've been told for a number of years. Now, the delinquent taxes are payable now to the county treasurer, not the township treasurer. And the county treasurer reimburses us for the delinquent taxes, and then they go collect them. So we will get all of our money, and we're online and where we have been, so that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that's all I got.
Thank you. Again, I want to echo everyone's comments and congratulating the new firefighters. Another good job by Chief. Great lineup. Also want to remind the residents that the hazardous waste collection and the secure paper shred day is this coming Saturday. The hazardous waste will be behind the Township Hall, and the secure shred will be at Jackman Road Elementary School. Both events run from 8 a.m. till noon, and again, that is this Saturday, the 21st. And if there's no other comments?
I have a question about your information in the packet.
Mhm.
Do we lease through T-Mobile now?
They have, on our, out here on the antenna, they have like their little piece. Because we rent to different entities, so they're one of them. And so they're asking to reduce. What I was told to do is just put this in your packet so you're aware of it. When the agreement comes, then I'll put it on the official agenda. But I wanted to let the board members know ahead of time, this will be coming. They want to give us a contract to reduce our current monthly rent.
Oh, good, okay, thank you.
And we can take it or reject it. I don't know what they'll do if we reject it. I doubt if they're going to want to pull it off the antenna. That just loses service for them, but I guess we'll see. Any other comments? Seeing none, meeting adjourned.